You wouldn't believe the chaos that started the moment Keran planted her flip-flops on my sand and declared it was hers. I was sipping lemonade, minding my own business, when she marched toward me like a storm rolling over calm water. She jabbed a finger at the beach sign and announced that her HOA controlled the entire shoreline. I smiled because she clearly hadn't read the smaller plaque underneath. That plaque had my name on it, the name of the guy who built the whole resort from the ground up. But I decided to let her play out her performance first. She paced in front of me, ranting about unauthorized umbrellas, suspicious coolers, and how I was trespassing on property that didn't belong to me. I nodded along, fascinated by her confidence and absolutely impressed by her lack of research. A small crowd gathered, whispering as they recognized me, but I subtly motioned for them to stay quiet. Keran mistook their silence for support and raised her voice even louder while lecturing me on rules I had personally written. Then she dragged her teenage daughter into the scene, insisting the girl take photos of me so she could file a complaint. The daughter didn't look thrilled, but she lifted her phone anyway and snapped a few half-hearted pictures. Keran strutted back to me, declaring triumphantly that this evidence would guarantee my removal. At that point, I decided her show deserved its grand finale, so I stood up and finally introduced myself. Keran crossed her arms, clearly preparing to interrupt, but the crowd leaned closer because they knew what was coming. I explained calmly that not only was I allowed to be on the beach, but I actually owned the resort surrounding it. Keran's confident smile dissolved, replaced by a confused squint as she tried to process my words. Her daughter lowered her phone slowly, whispering something that sounded a lot like an apology. Before Keran could fire back, one of the resort managers approached and greeted me with the kind of respect that instantly confirmed everything I had said. The manager politely asked if I wanted assistance, giving Keran a pointed smile that made her step backward in stunned silence. Keran muttered something about misunderstandings and community standards, but her voice had lost all its earlier fire. I told her there was no harm done and suggested she and her daughter enjoy the beach, though maybe with a little less yelling next time. She nodded stiffly, clearly embarrassed, while her daughter managed a small, grateful smile in my direction. As they walked away, the crowd dispersed, leaving me amused by the whole encounter and ready for whatever came next. Little did I know this was only the beginning of her antics. Keran might have retreated from the beach that day, but her ego clearly didn't. The very next morning, before the sun had even burned through the mist, I got a knock on my villa door. It was one of my resort security staff, holding a stack of papers and trying very hard not to laugh. At the top was an official HOA violation notice, signed, stamped and delivered by none other than Keran herself. The accusation? Unauthorized occupancy of beach-adjacent property. In other words, she was attempting to evict me from my own resort. I walked down to the lobby to clear my head and found Keran pacing near the concierge desk, waving a clipboard like she was directing traffic. The moment she spotted me, she straightened her posture and launched into a speech about community cohesion, property boundaries, and a list of imaginary infractions she claimed I had committed. I listened calmly, enjoying the spectacle. Then she pulled out something new, a set of grainy photos her daughter had apparently taken. Most of them were crooked, blurry, or aimed at the sky. Keran slammed them on the counter and demanded immediate action. The concierge gently explained that I owned the resort, but Keran insisted she had documents proving otherwise. At that exact moment, her daughter wandered in, wearing headphones and looking mortified. She apologized quietly to me, saying she hadn't meant to take the photos. Her mom had insisted. She even admitted she knew exactly who I was but hadn't bothered, correcting her mom because, as she put it, nothing stops her when she's on a mission. Keran ignored all of this and ordered the concierge to escort me off the property. When he didn't move, she accused him of insubordination. Before things could escalate further, I finally stepped forward and invited Keran to join me for a walk so I could show her something important. She hesitated, but curiosity overpowered her stubbornness. As we headed toward the service path, her daughter followed at a distance, clearly worried her mother was about to embarrass herself again. Keran demanded to know what I planned to reveal. I told her it was the truth, something she seemed determined to avoid. When we reached the maintenance yard behind the resort, she gasped. My name was etched in metal on the side of the construction plaques. along with photos from the groundbreaking ceremony. Her daughter laughed softly, covering her mouth. Keran's face shifted through about 6 emotions in 5 seconds. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and finally managed a tiny nod, as if accepting that her entire crusade had crashed into reality harder than she expected on that unexpectedly warm day. Keran's meltdown over the construction plaques should have been the end of things, but of course it wasn't. The very next afternoon, I spotted her daughter wandering near the resort's pasture trail, where my small herd of show cows grazed lazily under the shade of palm trees. She wasn't yelling, arguing, or waving paperwork. She was just taking selfies. Lots of them. And honestly, I didn't mind. The cows certainly didn't. They posed better than most influencers. I kept my distance, amused, until Keran appeared out of nowhere like a dust devil, shouting for her daughter to get away from the dangerous livestock. The girl tried explaining that my cows were basically giant puppies, but Keran insisted they were unpredictable beasts. I finally stepped forward, assuring her the cows were gentle. She narrowed her eyes, clearly remembering her previous embarrassment, and demanded proof. Before I could answer, her daughter snapped another selfie, and one of my friendliest cows, Buttercup, leaned in, curious and adorable. Keran gasped as if she had just witnessed a life-or-death situation. Her daughter rolled her eyes and kept taking pictures, moving closer to get a better angle with Buttercup's big soft nose in the frame. This gave me an idea. A few minutes earlier, a maintenance crew had been preparing to move a manure loader nearby. It wasn't messy at the moment, just a huge machine parked in the sun. With perfect timing, I climbed into the cab, eased it forward, and gently positioned it behind the girl just as she lifted her phone again. The moment she snapped the selfie, I raised the loader's bucket slightly and smiled. She gasped, then burst into laughter. She ran over to show me the photo, her grinning next to a cow with me popping up behind them in a massive machine like some kind of resort-themed photobomb superhero. It was ridiculous, harmless, and honestly one of the best pictures I'd ever seen. Keran, however, was not impressed. She marched toward us, demanding the photo be deleted because it violated safety protocols. Her daughter clutched her phone protectively and declared it was the funniest picture she'd ever taken. I reassured Keran that everything had been perfectly safe and that the loader hadn't even moved an inch toward anyone. Her daughter looked at me and whispered that she wanted to print the photo later. Keran finally fell silent, staring at her daughter's genuine happiness, a rare sight, I suspected. As we walked back toward the main path, Keran seemed unusually quiet, processing everything. Her daughter kept laughing at the selfie, and even the maintenance crew smiled as we passed, sensing the strange peace settling over the moment. The morning after the manure loader photobomb, something unexpected happened. Keran knocked on my office door, politely, for once. I half expected another lecture about regulations or community harmony, but instead she walked in holding 2 cups of coffee and that same nervous half-smile you see on someone trying to undo a mistake. She started with an apology that sounded awkward at first, like she wasn't used to saying sorry. She admitted she'd moved into the nearby HOA neighborhood only a few months earlier and had been trying to make a good impression by enforcing every rule she could find. Somewhere along the line, she'd mistaken authority for respect. I could tell it wasn't easy for her to say. Her daughter joined her a few moments later, holding her phone. She showed me the now famous selfie, her, Buttercup, and me photobombing in the background. The picture had somehow gone mildly viral after she posted it online. People were commenting things like, "When the resort owner is cooler than the HOA," and "Best photobomb ever." Keran looked mortified, but also relieved. It seemed that laughter had melted a layer of pride off her shoulders. I told her I didn't mind the photo at all. In fact, I'd love to frame it and hang it in the guest cafe as a reminder that even tense situations can end in smiles. Her daughter grinned, and for the first time, Keran laughed too. A real laugh, not the sharp kind she'd used on the beach. She even joked that she'd have to find a new hobby since terrorizing beachgoers wasn't working out so well. I offered her a tour of the resort, this time as my guest, not my self-appointed supervisor. As we walked, she asked about the resort's history, the design process, and how I'd managed to turn a stretch of dunes into a thriving getaway. Her questions weren't confrontational anymore, they were curious. By the time we reached the shore, her daughter had kicked off her sandals and was snapping photos again, this time of the ocean, not for evidence. Before leaving, Keran turned to me and said, "You know, I think I learned something about ownership this week. Sometimes it's not about control, it's about care." I nodded, genuinely impressed by her turnaround. The whole resort had quietly watched this story unfold, and soon enough, the legend of HOA Keran and the Beach Builder became a favorite tale among staff and guests alike. And as for that selfie, it's still hanging in the cafe. 3 unexpected friends, a happy cow, and a perfect reminder that humility can build more bridges than rules ever could. Enjoying this wild HOA Keran versus resort owner saga? Tap subscribe so you don't miss the next round of real-life plot twists from the beach. If this chapter made you laugh, hit like and drop a comment. What would you have done when Keran tried to take over the whole shoreline?